Papa, please don't go. Not now. Not this way. Those were the final words Sophie Anderson whispered against her father's chest as he drew his last breath in that sterile hospital room. But what she witnessed next defied belief. Less than 24 hours after her father's passing, barely a day after laying to rest the one person who'd loved her unconditionally. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now let's jump right back in. Her husband Derek was at the courthouse signing marriage documents with his affair partner Jessica, the woman who'd murmured, "At last," when Sophie's father's heart monitor went silent. Sophie stood there 6 months pregnant, carrying a child who'd never know its grandfather, gripping her father's weathered jacket that still carried his scent, watching through streaming tears as her husband wed his lover while the cemetery soil from her dad's burial that very morning still clung beneath her fingernails from arranging lilies on his coffin. But what shattered Sophie's heart into fragments so tiny she struggled to breathe wasn't simply witnessing her husband marry his mistress 24 hours after her father's death. It was the envelope quaking in her grip. The envelope her dying father had pressed into her palm with his remaining strength, whispering, "My precious girl, after I'm gone, open this and remember, you are never abandoned. You are never destitute. You are never helpless. I ensured that." What Derek didn't realize is he kissed his mistress on lips that should have consoled his mourning pregnant wife. What Jessica didn't know as she grinned triumphantly over the devastated woman still dressed in funeral attire was that Sophie's dad, the modest custodian who'd cleaned floors at a public school for 35 years, who'd taken holiday shifts so Sophie could receive gifts, who'd survived on instant noodles for dinner so she could attend ballet classes, wasn't merely a custodian. He was a hidden billionaire worth $5.2 billion, who'd given up everything to demonstrate to his daughter that integrity matters more than currency. That genuine affection is worth more than extravagance. That a compassionate soul is the only treasure that genuinely matters. And in precisely 2 hours and 47 minutes, when Sophie's hands finally steadied enough to unseal that testament and inherited $5 billion, his mistress Jessica would release a scream so visceral, so saturated with dread and realization that it would reverberate in that parking structure like an injured creature. "Dear Lord Derek, you abandoned a billionaire. You divorced a billionaire for me. What have we accomplished?" But here's the element that'll fracture your heart and mend it simultaneously. 3 weeks before his passing, Sophie's dad contacted his attorney from his hospital bed, his voice faint, but his thoughts lucid, and stated, "Martin, I need you to listen attentively. My son-in-law is going to abandon my daughter. I can detect it in his demeanor. He observes her like she's an obligation now that she's expecting and I'm dying. So, I need you to ensure that when he departs, when he believes he's fleeing poverty for something superior, he can never ever access what I'm leaving her. Place it in an irrevocable trust. Make it impenetrable. Because when my precious girl discovers who she truly is, I want her to understand her father protected her even from beyond the grave." Listen to me carefully. If you have ever experienced abandonment, betrayal, or underestimation, you need to hit that subscribe button right now because Sophie's story is about to demonstrate that sometimes the individuals who abandon you do you the greatest service of your existence. Smash that like button if you believe in cosmic justice. If you believe decent people deserve vindication, if you believe that affection, genuine affection, is the only thing that endures forever. And comment below sharing, have you ever lost someone who cherished you more than existence itself? Tell me about them. Honor them because this story is for everyone who's ever been safeguarded by someone who recognized their value when nobody else did. But to comprehend how we arrived here, to understand why Sophie's father knew precisely what Derek would do, we need to return 24 hours earlier to the moment everything collapsed and converged simultaneously. The hospital room carried the scent of antiseptic and mortality. Sophie had been seated in that identical plastic chair for 16 hours continuously. Her hand wrapped around her father's, observing the monitors measure out his final moments in beeps and digits that kept getting slower, quieter, weaker. Thomas Anderson, or as the world recognized him, just another invisible custodian in an ocean of working individuals, lay beneath white sheets that made his dark complexion look ashen, made him appear smaller than he'd ever been in Sophie's perception. He'd always been larger than existence to her. The man who instructed her to ride a bicycle on Saturday mornings before his shift commenced. The man who attended every parent-teacher conference in his work uniform, carrying the scent of pine cleaner and effort, sitting in those tiny chairs with such pride. It didn't matter what he wore or how exhausted he appeared. The man who told her every single night before sleep, "You are brilliant. You are valuable. You are cherished beyond measure." And now he was departing. The cancer had arrived fast and brutal. 3 months from diagnosis to this moment, pancreatic stage 4. By the time they detected it, the physicians had stated maybe 6 months with treatment. He'd survived barely 12 weeks. Sophie's phone vibrated in her lap. She glanced at the screen through tears. Her husband Derek, the text read, "Still at the hospital? My presentation got rescheduled to tomorrow morning. Going to crash at Mike's tonight to prepare. Don't wait up." She stared at the words, something frigid settling in her chest. Her father was dying right now, this instant. And Derek was concerned about a sales presentation. She didn't respond. She turned the phone face down and squeezed her father's hand tighter. His eyes fluttered open, still sharp, still her father's eyes, even as everything else was ceasing. "Sophie," he whispered, his voice like paper tearing. "My beautiful girl. I'm here, Papa. I'm right here. Need to tell you something." He struggled to breathe. The ventilator hissing beside him. "Critical. Listen attentively. Preserve your strength. We can talk when you're improved. No, precious." His grip tightened with surprising force. "No more pretending. This is it, and you need to know everything." Sophie's tears fell faster. "Papa, please." "In my apartment," he continued. Each word an effort. "Bedroom closet. Old Nike shoe box. False bottom. There's a key. A key. Safety deposit box. First National Bank. Box 1247. He coughed, his whole body trembling. "Everything you need is there. Everything I should have revealed years ago. I don't comprehend." "You will." His eyes found hers. And in them she witnessed something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not of dying, but of leaving her unprepared. "Promise me. Promise you'll go. Promise you won't tell anyone until you comprehend." "I promise. Not Derek." His voice gained sudden strength. "Especially not Derek." Sophie's breath caught. What? "Because I observe him, precious. I see how he observes you now that you're expecting. Now that I'm sick, like you're an obligation instead of a blessing." His breathing was getting shallower. "I added something to my testament 3 weeks ago. Protection for you, for my grandchild." "Papa, what are you discussing?" But the machines were changing their rhythm. The beeps were spreading further apart. A nurse rushed in, checked the monitors, and her expression told Sophie everything. "Mr. Anderson," the nurse said gently. "Do you want us to?" "No," Thomas whispered. "No machines, just my daughter." The nurse nodded and quietly departed, closing the door behind her. Thomas looked at Sophie, and despite everything he smiled. "You know what the finest day of my existence was?" Sophie shook her head, unable to speak past the sob in her throat. "The day your mother placed you in my arms. You were so tiny, so perfect. And I looked at you and I thought, this is it. This is what I was born for. Not wealth, not authority, not all the things my family tried to make me desire. Just you. Just loving you, Mama." Sophie's voice broke. Her mother had died giving birth to her. She'd never known her. She was a teacher, beautiful, compassionate, everything pure in this world. His eyes were distant now, seeing something Sophie couldn't. "My family despised her. Said she wasn't adequate, was in our class. They gave me a choice. Her or the inheritance." "What inheritance?" "I chose her, precious. Every time I chose affection, and when she died bringing you into this world, I chose you. I walked away from billions to raise you properly, to instruct you what actually matters." Sophie's head was spinning. "Billions, Papa, what?" "My real name is Thomas Wellington III. Each word was getting harder for him. "Wellington Industrial Holdings, my grandfather's empire. I was supposed to assume control. Supposed to marry some socialite my mother selected. But I met your mother at a charity event, and I knew she was my genuine existence. So I departed, changed my name, got a job mopping floors, and I never regretted it. Not once. You've been wealthy this whole time." Sophie couldn't process it. Her father, who'd worked double shifts, who'd driven a vehicle held together with duct tape, who'd made her peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day because that's what they could afford. Not wealthy, precious. Affluent. There's a difference. Wealthy is what you possess. Affluent is what you are. He smiled through the pain. "And you, my darling girl, are the most affluent person I know. You have character, integrity, a heart so expansive it frightens me sometimes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to grow up normal. To marry someone who cherished you, not your bank account. To know your own strength." His breathing was labored now. "But I never stopped managing it. The wealth, growing it, protecting it for you." The monitors were screaming now. Sophie wanted to call the nurses, but she couldn't release his hand. "The envelope," Thomas gasped. "In the deposit box, it explains everything. The trusts, the protections, and precious." He pulled her close with his last bit of strength. Trust the plan. I know it's going to hurt. I know what's approaching, but trust the plan. What's approaching, Papa? What do you mean? But his eyes were closing. You are never abandoned. You are never destitute. You are never helpless. I ensured that. Papa, no. I cherish you, Sophie, more than all the wealth in the world. You are my greatest treasure. And then he was gone. Just like that. The machines flatlined. The sound echoed in Sophie's ears like the end of everything. She collapsed onto his chest, sobbing so violently she couldn't breathe. Clutching his worn work shirt, breathing in the smell of him one last time. Irish Spring soap and coffee and affection. She didn't hear the door open. Didn't hear the nurses come in. Didn't hear them gently tell her it was time to release. All she heard was the silence where her father's voice used to be. And in her pocket, her phone vibrated again. Derek. Hey babe. Mike's girlfriend is here too. We're all going to grab drinks. Probably be a late night. You good? Sophie stared at the text through tears, her father's words echoing. I see how he observes you like you're an obligation instead of a blessing. She finally witnessed it too. The rain hammered down on Evergreen Cemetery like the sky itself was mourning. Sophie stood at the edge of her father's grave, her black dress soaked through, her hand resting on her swollen belly as the preacher's words blurred into meaningless sound. She couldn't hear him over the roar in her head, the desperate voice screaming that this couldn't be real, that any second now her father would walk up behind her and say, "Just kidding, precious girl, I'm not going anywhere." But the mahogany casket being lowered into the ground said different. The lilies she'd placed on top, his favorite yellow ones, were already wilting in the rain, petals washing away into the mud. There were maybe 30 people there, former co-workers from the public school, a few neighbors, some distant cousins who'd shown up out of obligation, people Sophie barely recognized. Her father had lived quietly, cherished deeply, and died, leaving a void in the world that felt too expansive for Sophie to survive. Derek stood beside her, but he might as well have been on another planet. He held an umbrella over his own head, not hers. He checked his phone every few minutes, his jaw tight with impatience. When the preacher said, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," Derek sighed loud enough for Sophie to hear it. She looked at him, then really looked at him and saw a stranger. This man who'd promised to cherish her in sickness and health, for better or worse, couldn't even pretend to care that she'd just lost everything. After the service, as people filed past offering condolences, Sophie would never remember. Derek leaned close and whispered, "I need to head out. Got a thing with some clients." Sophie turned to him slowly. "A thing?" "Derek, we just buried my father." "I know, babe, and I'm sorry, but this deal has been in the works for months. I can't just your wife just buried her father." Her voice was flat. Lifeless. "And you have a thing." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Look, you've got people here. You'll be fine. I'll see you at home later." He kissed her forehead. Quick, perfunctory, the way you'd pat a dog, and walked away. Through the rain toward the parking lot, pulling out his phone before he'd even made it to his vehicle. Sophie watched him go, something breaking inside her that she didn't have a name for yet. An elderly woman approached Mrs. Liu, who'd worked the front desk at her father's school. She pulled Sophie into a fierce embrace that smelled like lavender and mothballs. "Your father was the finest man I ever knew," she whispered. "He talked about you every single day. You were his whole world." Sophie couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears mixing with rain on her face. "He told me something a few weeks ago," Mrs. Liu continued. "He said, 'Helen, my precious girl is stronger than she knows, and soon she's going to need every bit of that strength.' I didn't comprehend what he meant then, but Sophie, honey, whatever you're facing, whatever's approaching, you've got your father's blood in you. That means you've got steel in your spine." The old woman squeezed her hand once and walked away, leaving Sophie standing alone in the rain, those words echoing. Whatever's approaching, her father had known. Somehow he'd known. That night, Sophie sat alone in her father's tiny apartment, surrounded by the existence he'd built. The threadbare couch he'd owned for 20 years. The TV that only got 3 channels. The kitchen table where he'd helped her with homework every night. Where they'd eaten countless dinners together, where he'd instructed her that the finest conversations happened over simple food and genuine affection. She should have been packing his things, sorting through belongings, doing all the practical tasks that come after death. But she couldn't move. She just sat there wearing his old jacket, breathing in the fading smell of him, trying to comprehend what he'd meant about the safety deposit box, about protection, about being a Wellington. Her phone rang. "Derek." "Hey," he said, background noise loud behind him. Music, laughter. "Just checking in. You okay?" "Where are you?" "Just grabbed dinner with the team. You know how it is. Had to decompress after the funeral. Heavy day." Heavy day. Like he'd been the one lowering his father into the ground. When are you coming home? I'll probably late. We might hit up a bar after this. You should get some rest. You look exhausted. I look exhausted. Her voice cracked. Derek, I buried my father today. I know, babe. That's why I'm saying you should rest. He sounded irritated now, like she was being unreasonable. Look, I got to go order some food, take a bath. I'll see you tomorrow. He hung up before she could respond. Sophie sat there staring at her phone, and that's when she witnessed it. A notification at the top of the screen. Derek, Instagram had been tagged in a photo. Her hands shook as she opened it. There he was at some trendy restaurant she'd never heard of, sitting in a booth. And next to him, pressed close, laughing at something he'd said, was a woman Sophie had never seen before. Beautiful, polished, wearing a crimson dress that probably cost more than Sophie's monthly rent. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings with my favorite people, OL Derek Rich." Oh, Jessica Chin, Senior Marketing Director at Derek Company. Sophie had heard the name before. Derek mentioned her sometimes, his boss, the woman he was always having meetings with. Sophie clicked on Jessica's profile. It was public, full of photos of expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, designer clothes, success personified. And there, 3 photos down, was another one. Derek and Jessica, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest, both of them smiling like they had won the lottery. Posted 6 weeks ago. While Sophie's father was dying, while Sophie was spending every night at the hospital, while her world was ending, the caption, "When you know you know." Sophie's vision blurred. She scrolled further. More photos. Derek and Jessica at a concert, at a beach, at what looked like a hotel room, though that one was more carefully cropped. The affair had been ongoing for months, maybe longer, while Sophie was pregnant with his child, while her father was dying. While she was drowning in grief and fear and loneliness, Derek had been building a whole other existence with someone else. She ran to the bathroom and vomited, her body rejecting the reality like poison. When she finally stopped trembling, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her face was pale. Her pregnant belly pushed against her father's oversized jacket. She looked exactly like what she was, a devastated woman who'd lost everything. And in that moment, staring at her own devastated reflection, Sophie made a decision. Tomorrow she would go to the bank. She would open that safety deposit box. She would discover what her father meant about being a Wellington, about protection, about never being helpless. Because right now she felt like the most helpless person on earth. Her phone vibrated. A text from Derek. "BTW. We need to talk when I get home. Something important." Those words, the ones that never mean anything good. Sophie knew what was approaching. She could feel it in her bones the way you feel a storm rolling in. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in exactly 18 hours her entire world would flip upside down in ways she couldn't imagine. The next morning came too fast and too slow simultaneously. Sophie hadn't slept. She'd spent the night on her father's couch, clutching his jacket, staring at the ceiling, waiting for Derek to come home. He never did. At 6 a.m. her phone vibrated. A text crashed at Mike's coming by at 9 o'clock. "We need to talk. Important." Sophie's hands went to her belly. Her baby, her little girl, the doctor had told her just last week, kicked hard like she could feel her mother's fear. "It's okay, sweet girl," Sophie whispered. "We're going to be okay. Your grandfather promised. We just have to trust the plan." But she had no idea what the plan was. At 8:30 a.m., Sophie forced herself to shower, to put on clean clothes, to look like a person instead of a ghost. She chose a simple black dress, the same one she'd worn to the funeral yesterday because everything else felt too cheerful, too alive for how she felt inside. She made coffee she wouldn't drink. Sat at the kitchen table. Waited. Derek arrived at 9:15, which meant he'd made her wait on purpose. Power play. She recognized it now. Wondered how many other small cruelties she'd missed while loving him. He looked good, rested, like he hadn't just attended his father-in-law's funeral yesterday. He was wearing cologne, expensive stuff he'd never worn around her. For a flash, Sophie wondered if he'd been with Jessica all night. "Hey," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "How you feeling?" "How do you think I'm feeling, Derek?" "I buried my father yesterday." "Right. Yeah." He sat down across from her and she witnessed it then, the folder in his hand. Manila, official looking, the kind lawyers use. Her heart started hammering. "Look, there's no easy way to say this." He slid the folder across the table. "I want a divorce." The words hit her like a physical blow. Even though she'd known, even though she'd witnessed it approaching, hearing them out loud made them real in a way that stole her breath. "What? I'm not happy, Sophie. I haven't been for a long time. His voice was rehearsed like he'd practiced this speech. We've grown apart. You've been so focused on your dad's illness and I need something different. My dad just died yesterday. Her voice didn't sound like her own. Yesterday, Derek, and you're asking me for a divorce today? The timing isn't ideal. Isn't ideal? She laughed a broken sound. I'm 6 months pregnant with your baby. My father, the only family I had left, just died. And the timing isn't ideal. I know it's difficult, but prolonging this doesn't help anyone. He was using his sales voice now, the one he used to close deals. I've already talked to a lawyer. Can be simple. Cling. You keep the apartment. I'll pay child support. We can both move on with our existences. Move on. Sophie's hands were shaking. To what? To who? She pulled out her phone, opened Instagram, shoved it across the table. To her, Derek's face went carefully blank. Sophie. How long? Her voice rose. How long have you been sleeping with your boss while I was watching my father die? It's not like that. Then what is it like? She was shouting now, something she never did. Tell me, Derek, what is it like to cheat on your pregnant wife while her father is dying of cancer? What is it like to attend his funeral and then go out celebrating with your mistress? What is it like? Don't make this ugly. His jaw was tight. I didn't plan for this to happen. Jessica and we connect on a level you and I never did. She's successful, ambitious, going places. She comprehends the existence I want. Every word was a knife. And what am I? Sophie's voice broke. What was I to you? You were my wife. Past tense. You're a good person, Sophie. You really are. But you were never going to be enough. Not for the existence I want to build. The cruelty of it took her breath away. I'm pregnant with your child. I know. And I'll support the baby financially. I'm not a monster, but I can't stay in a marriage that makes me miserable just because of biology. He stood up, buttoned his jacket. Sign the papers. My lawyer will be in touch about the details. I'll come by this weekend to get my stuff. Derek, please. She despised the begging in her voice. Despised that even now, even after everything. Some part of her wanted him to stay. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and what she witnessed in his eyes was worse than anger. It was pity. You'll be okay, Sophie. You're strong. You'll figure it out. And then he departed. Just walked out. Left her sitting there 6 months pregnant, freshly orphaned, with divorce papers on the table and a future that looked like a black hole. Sophie sat in the silence, her father's words echoing. I see it in his eyes. He observes you like you're an obligation. Her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Hi Sophie, this is Jessica. I know this must be difficult for you, but Derek and I are in affection. We'd appreciate your discretion and cooperation during this transition. We'd like to move forward with our existences as quickly as possible. Thank you for understanding. The audacity. The sheer breathtaking audacity. Something shifted in Sophie. Then something frigid and clear and sharp. She picked up her keys, grabbed her father's jacket, and drove to First National Bank. It was time to discover what her father had meant about never being helpless. The bank was old, imposing, all marble floors and cathedral ceilings. Sophie walked up to the information desk, her pregnant belly leading the way, and said, I need to access safety deposit box 1247. The woman's fingers flew over her keyboard. Then she paused, looked up at Sophie with new eyes. One moment, please. I need to get the manager. A man in an expensive suit appeared within minutes. Miss Wellington Anderson, Sophie corrected automatically. She was led to a private room, used 2 keys to open the box, and then quietly excused himself. Inside was a single large envelope. Sophie's hands shook as she opened it. The first thing she witnessed was a letter in her father's handwriting. But beneath it were documents. So many documents, stock certificates, property deeds, bank statements with numbers that didn't make sense. She read the letter first. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're probably confused, maybe frightened, definitely mourning. I'm so sorry I'm not there to explain this in person, to hold you while you process it, to witness your face when you realize who you truly are. But precious girl, it's time you knew the truth about the Wellington family, about me, about everything I've been protecting you from and protecting for you all these years. Sophie read the whole thing, tears streaming down her face, her thoughts struggling to process what her father was revealing. He was Thomas Wellington III, heir to a $3 billion empire. He had walked away at 23 to marry her mother, the woman his family said wasn't adequate. He'd changed his name, taken a custodian job, built a genuine existence based on affection instead of wealth. But he'd never given up the inheritance. He just hidden it, managed it quietly through lawyers, let it grow, protected it for her, and 3 weeks before he died, knowing what Derek would do, he'd restructured everything, put it all in an irrevocable trust that Derek could never access, not even if they were still married. The total estate value, current assessment, $5.2 billion. Sophie read that number. 5 times billion with a B. Her father, her papa, who'd eaten instant noodles for dinner so she could have ballet lessons, had been worth $5 billion, and he'd left every penny of it to her. There was a final paragraph in the letter that made her sob out loud. I know what Derek is going to do, precious girl. I've witnessed it in his eyes for months now. He's going to abandon you. He's going to hurt you in ways that will make you question everything. But I need you to comprehend something. Him departing is the greatest gift he could give you. Because now you'll know. You'll know that when he chose to go, he had no idea what he was walking away from. He abandoned you because he thought you were destitute. Because he thought you were weak. Because he thought he could do better. And Sophie, my darling daughter, I need you to let him go. Let him marry his mistress. Let him build his little existence. And when you're ready, when you've healed, you demonstrate to him and her and the whole world exactly who Sophie Anderson Wellington truly is. Not with cruelty, not with revenge, but by building an existence so beautiful, so meaningful, so powerful that they spend the rest of their days choking on regret. That's the Wellington way. We don't destroy our enemies. We simply become so magnificent they destroy themselves. Trust the plan, precious girl. I cherish you more than all the billions in the world. Papa. Sophie sat in that room for 2 hours reading and rereading every document, every letter, every piece of her father's secret existence. Then she pulled out her phone and called the law firm whose card was attached to the documents. Wellington and Associates. A man answered immediately. Miss Anderson, we've been expecting your call. I'm Martin Bradford, your father's attorney and your cousin. Actually, your father was my Uncle Thomas. I'd very much like to meet with you to explain everything and begin the transition of assets. Would tomorrow work? Tomorrow? Sophie's voice was hollow. My husband just asked me for a divorce this morning. I know, Martin's voice was gentle. Your father predicted that would happen. He had me prepare something special for that exact scenario. Sophie, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your Uncle Thomas was the finest man I ever knew. But I promise you he's still protecting you. Everything is in place. Everything is going to be okay. Sophie ended the call and sat in the silence, her hand on her belly, her thoughts reeling. Derek had asked for a divorce because he thought she had nothing, because he thought Jessica with her 6-figure salary and her designer clothes was a better bet. He had no idea he just walked away from $5 billion. And tomorrow Sophie was going to start learning exactly what that meant. But first she had to sign those divorce papers. She had to let him go. Not because she was weak, but because her father had instructed her something Derek would never comprehend. True power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It observes. It moves when the time is right. Sophie drove home, signed every page Derek had left her, and placed them in an envelope addressed to his lawyer. Then she opened her laptop and bought a ticket to New York for the next morning. Martin Bradford had offered to send a private jet, but Sophie had declined. She wasn't ready for that world yet. She needed one more day of being regular Sophie. One more day before everything changed. Her phone vibrated. A text from Derek. Did you sign? She typed back, yes, you're free. His response came immediately. Thank you for being reasonable about this. For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness. Sophie stared at those words, the casual cruelty of them, the assumption that he was doing her a favor, that she should be grateful. She deleted the message without responding. Then she opened Instagram and looked at Jessica's profile one more time. The latest post showed her and Derek at what looked like a jewelry store. The caption, when you know you know. Engaged, new beginnings. They'd gotten engaged. The same day he'd asked for a divorce, probably the same day Sophie had buried her father. Sophie felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not even hurt anymore. Something colder, something patient, something her father had spent her whole existence instructing her, even though she hadn't known what the lessons were for. Dignity in the face of cruelty. Grace under pressure, the long game. She commented on the post, congratulations. I wish you both all the happiness you deserve. Every word meant exactly what it said. Within an hour the post had exploded. People who knew Sophie, who knew she'd just lost her father and her husband in the same week, were commenting in outrage. Jessica's comment section became a war zone. Sophie turned off her phone and went to sleep in her father's apartment, wrapped in his jacket, her hand on her belly. Your grandfather was a wise man, she whispered to her baby. He knew exactly what he was doing. We just have to trust the plan. Outside, thunder rumbled. A storm was approaching, but Sophie Anderson Wellington was ready for it. The law offices of Wellington and Associates occupied the entire 47th floor of the Sterling Tower in Manhattan. And when Sophie stepped out of the elevator the next morning, everything was glass and chrome and the kind of quiet that wealth buys. The receptionist looked up and her expression shifted immediately. "Miss Wellington Anderson," Sophie corrected automatically. She was led down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-looking men in suits, Wellingtons, her ancestors. And then she witnessed it at the end of the hall. A portrait of a young man with compassionate eyes and a smile that wanted to break free. Her father, young, wealthy before he'd walked away from all of this. A distinguished man in his 60s stepped out, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Sophie, I'm Martin Bradford, your Uncle Martin. Your father was my uncle." He led her into a conference room where two other people waited, a sharp-eyed woman and a younger man with a laptop. "This is Patricia Morrison, your financial advisor, and David Liu, your accountant. They've been managing your father's holdings for 15 years now. They work for you." Over the next hours they walked Sophie through everything. She owned controlling shares in 17 major corporations, commercial real estate in 12 states, a stock portfolio worth $1.8 billion, an art collection valued at $400 million, liquid assets totaling $600 million. "Your father restructured everything 3 weeks before he died," Martin said quietly. "The day after Derek visited him in the hospital." Sophie's breath caught. "Derek visited him? He told me he couldn't get away from work." Martin's expression darkened. "He spent 15 minutes complaining about hospital bills, how the pregnancy was bad timing, how he was under pressure at work. He asked if your father had life insurance to offset the burden. Your father heard every word. The next day he called me and made absolutely certain Derek could never access a penny of it." Sophie felt tears sliding down her face. "He knew." Martin slid a final letter across the table. "Derek didn't abandon because you weren't enough. He abandoned because he wasn't enough. Now rise not for revenge but because you are a Wellington. Build something beautiful. Help people. And when Derek witnesses what you've become, smile. Because their regret is not your burden. Live well. That's the finest revenge of all." Sophie wiped her eyes. "I want to help women in crisis, single mothers, women who feel helpless and alone. I want to start immediately. Your father already established a foundation with a $500 million endowment," Patricia said gently. "It's ready whenever you are." "Then I'm ready. But first, I want to host a dinner for potential partners and board members." Sophie pulled up Jessica's LinkedIn. "She's a senior marketing director, successful, well-connected, exactly the kind of person a new foundation would want to meet, wouldn't she?" Martin's smile turned knowing, along with her new husband, of course. 3 weeks later, elegant invitations arrived at 50 carefully selected addresses. "The Anderson Wellington Foundation cordially invites you to an intimate dinner reception, Friday, October 15th, 7:00 p.m. The Metropolitan Club." Jessica showed it to Derek immediately, her eyes bright. "This could be huge for my career if I could get on their board." She RSVP'd yes within the hour. The Metropolitan Club was old wealth elegance, soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, power whispered instead of shouted. Sophie arrived early in an emerald green maternity gown, diamond earrings that had belonged to her Wellington grandmother sparkling at her ears. She was 7 months pregnant now and she'd never felt more powerful. At 7:15, Derek and Jessica walked in. Sophie witnessed them before they witnessed her. Derek uncomfortable among genuine wealth. Jessica confident in her crimson designer dress scanning the room for important people to impress. Martin stepped to the front. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our founder and director, Miss Sophie Anderson Wellington." Sophie stepped forward. Every eye in the room turned to her, including Derek, including Jessica's. She watched the recognition hit them, watched Derek's face drain of color, watched Jessica's smile freeze and crack. "Thank you all for coming," Sophie said, her voice steady. 3 months ago, I lost my father, a custodian at a public school, who instructed me that true affluence isn't measured in bank accounts, but in existences you touch and integrity you carry. What I didn't know was that my father, Thomas Wellington III, had walked away from his family's fortune 35 years ago to marry the woman he cherished. He chose affection over wealth. He raised me to value the same things. Derek gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. When he passed, he left me his entire estate, valued at approximately $5.2 billion. But more than that, he left me a mission to help women who feel helpless and abandoned. Because 3 months ago I was one of those women. Sophie's eyes found Derek directly. I was 6 months pregnant, mourning my father's death when my husband asked me for a divorce. He told me I would never be enough, that he'd found someone superior, someone successful, ambitious, going places. Jessica was trembling, her hand over her mouth. He divorced me thinking I had nothing. And I let him go because my father instructed me you can't lose what's genuinely yours, and you can't keep what was never meant to stay. This foundation is for every woman who's been underestimated, told she's not enough. Because sometimes the individuals who abandon you do you the greatest favor of your existence. She raised her glass. To new beginnings, to comprehending your value. The room erupted in applause. People rushed to congratulate her. And in the back, Derek and Jessica stood frozen, watching the woman they'd pitted become the center of a world they'd never access. Derek grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her toward the exit. They made it to the parking garage before Jessica's composure shattered. The scream echoed off concrete walls, raw and full of horror. Dear Lord Derek, you abandoned a billionaire. You divorced a billionaire for me. What have we accomplished? I didn't know. You didn't know. Jessica was hysterical. Her father was a custodian. You said she was destitute. You said we were trading up. She was destitute. How was I supposed to know? You abandoned her while she was pregnant. You married me 24 hours after her father died. And she's worth $5 billion. What you lost, Derek shot back. You pushed me to abandon her. Because you told me she had nothing. Jessica's voice broke. I'm the other woman in a story where the wife is one of the wealthiest people in the state. My reputation, my career, everything is destroyed. She looked at her wedding ring and laughed bitterly. I thought I won, but she let you go because you were nothing and she knew it before we did. Jessica pulled off her ring and threw it at him. I can't be married to a man stupid enough to divorce a billionaire. This is over. Jessica, wait. But she was gone, leaving Derek alone with the echo of her screams and the weight of the biggest mistake of his existence. Upstairs, Sophie was accepting promises of support, feeling her baby kicked strong and healthy. Martin approached with a knowing smile. They departed rather quickly. Jessica was screaming in the parking garage. Sophie felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just calm certainty. My father once told me the finest revenge is building an existence so beautiful your enemies destroy themselves watching it. He'd be very proud of you. I know. I can feel it. 2 months later, Sophie gave birth to Emma Thomas Anderson Wellington. Derek was allowed supervised visits because Sophie believed her daughter deserved to know her father, even if he'd proven unworthy of being in Sophie's existence. Jessica moved to Boston to escape the scandal, declared bankruptcy, took a lower-paying job where no one knew about the parking garage screaming, and Sophie built her foundation into something transformative. 200 women helped in the first year, rent paid, hope restored. 5 years later, Emma started kindergarten at the same school where her grandfather had worked as a custodian. Derek showed up to drop her off, watching his confident daughter skip into the building. She's amazing, he said quietly. Yes, Sophie agreed. She is. He wanted to say he'd changed, that he comprehended now, that he'd give anything for a second chance. But Sophie's eyes were on her daughter, and he realized she wasn't thinking about him at all. She'd won not by destroying him, but by building an existence so full, so meaningful that his presence or absence made no difference. Sophie stood in the morning sunlight, her father's words echoing, "You are never abandoned. You are never destitute. You are never helpless." And she knew he'd been right, not because of the billions, but because he'd raised her to know that true power comes from within. True affluence is measured in affection, and the individuals who abandon you are making room for the existence you were always meant to live. So, if you've ever felt abandoned, betrayed, or told you weren't enough, remember Sophie's story. Sometimes the individuals who walk away are doing you the biggest favor of your existence. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Lagos, New York, London, somewhere else? Drop your location in the comments right now. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you know, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this, because you are never helpless. You just might not know it yet. Thanks for watching, and remember, the finest revenge is living.